This episode is sponsored by our friends at BVI Yacht Sales in Tortola. With decades of experience, BVI Yacht Sales is dedicated to guiding you through every step of buying or selling your yacht in the Caribbean, ensuring top-notch service. I first met managing director Brian Duff way back in the day in Annapolis. Brian is himself an accomplished sailor and actually owned the rig shop where I worked for a time in the mid-2000s. Brian and his team can help list your boat for sale or help you find your dream boat, whether or not they're actually listing it. And don't let the name fool you. They've got an office in Annapolis too. We joke about broker BS on the podcast, but you can trust our friends at BVI Yacht Sales. Check out their listings and get in touch at bviyachtsales.com, just like it sounds, and tell them 59 North sent you. That's bviyachtsales.com. Welcome back to the Quarterdeck Podcast. I'm your host, Andy. This week, me and one of 59 North's skippers, JoJo Pickering, are nerding out about celestial navigation. JoJo's been teaching online courses. I've got a in-real-life course coming up in Annapolis. There's still a couple spaces open on mine, and I think JoJo's is available online as well. We'll put the link in the episode notes for this episode for both of those. JoJo and I just kind of nerd out about what it's like to teach celestial and why we love it as an art and a science. I tell some stories about the one time we did a real trip on celestial from BVI to Bermuda, and lots more nerdy celestial stuff. Okay, here we go. So, JoJo,
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
You and I are both very passionate about celestial, and I saw you started teaching these online courses and stuff, and I haven't done a course myself in a long time, probably maybe even since COVID or shortly after. And I'm doing another one in April this year, and I thought, let me sit down and nerd out with JoJo about celestial because there's probably something I can learn from you and how you teach it. And I also suspect that you and I may have similar teaching styles. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And I guess I'll start by just asking you, what is it about celestial specifically that you enjoy teaching?
I guess celestial is full of lots of historical connotations for me. I remember my father from the youngest age taking sights, and he taught me as a teenager. And I think a lot of modern navigation, we've kind of lost some of the basics of navigation because we're just relying on GPS. And I'm actually quite inspired by how many people now want to learn this art of celestial navigation. And it is an art, and it doesn't give you a fix at the point of time you might exactly need it. And I just became really aware that, because I also teach RYA Ocean, that people really struggle to learn what they need to learn in that short space of time. So that's why I decided to do these online courses, really, because it's very much the idea is to be able to teach people in smaller steps, because adding time and degrees is tricky, isn't it?
That is the start. You're mixing base 60 and base 10 math when you do degrees, minutes, and then decimal minutes, and it's like it's an exercise in precision when you're doing it. You really have to keep your columns lined up. I mean, it's basically back to grade school pencil and paper math.
Yeah, yes, it is, and it's amazing. Lots of people haven't done that for so many years. That's one of the things that I spend time on, is making sure that everybody can do that and understands how to do that.
So you said you think that with GPS, people are missing some of the basics. What do you mean by that?
I think there's lots of old school techniques that we don't tend to use so much anymore. So when you would make land, for example, you'd always make land upwind and up tide of where you think you're going, so that you can then run down the coastline and figure out exactly where you are on the coast as you do so, and then make port. And I've had a lot of conversations with people trying to explain that, and people aren't taught that, don't know about that. So that's just a little example, yeah. And also sorry.
Go ahead.
The precision, people are expecting really precise pinpointing, and that's not necessary. I mean, not possible with traditional navigation.
And you came up like when you were cruising with your parents, it was pre GPS, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
were you involved in that in like in the nav? I mean, you said you watched your dad, but were you actually hands on doing any of that as a kid?
I was too young to start with. I mean, initially, I mean, I always think about when I oh, let's go backwards a bit. My mother was taught to use a sextant and do the calculations with the Kenyan Navy. They came up to the place where we were building the boat, and she would be collected with a launch and taken off to the officers to be taught how to do celestial navigation. And I went and played with the ordinary sailors. Um, so
How old were
when
you at the
I
time?
was about 1.5 or just under one and a
Okay,
half,
okay.
I was
So
really young.
you don't have any real memories of this, I suppose.
No, I don't have memories of that, but I have strong memories of my dad taking sun sights and just seeing him
Mm.
swaying with the boat. But when they left Africa, they'd never tested this out. They didn't have GPS to test it with, and they had to find little islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And I think back to that now, at least now, when we're learning, we can check it with the GPS and see how accurate we are, which is completely different.
Have you done a passage purely on celestial
Yes, yeah. When
because you
I
had to or because you wanted to?
because I wanted to. When I sailed back from the Caribbean to um, the Azores with my family, by that time they were all okay and they didn't really need me so much, so I could actually spend a bit more time on traditional navigation, which was brilliant. Yeah,
How did you have the discipline to not look at the GPS?
I did. But I did it all. I did it all with Celestial, but every Celestial fix had its GPS equivalent beside it. So I was doing it as a learning technique as well. But I did the dead reckoning the whole way, and then adjusted the dead reckoning by the daily fix every time. Because that's the other thing that people forget about actually that Celestial navigation is checking your DR, and you've got to get good at dead reckoning.
So we have to. I mean, even that. This kind of begs the question for me, anyway. When you are starting a course, presumably you've got people with various backgrounds and various levels of experience. Where do you start? Okay, it's minute zero on your celestial course. What's the first thing you introduce?
Um, I like to sort of talk about the fact that when we take a 3 point fix with a lighthouse, or three lighthouses, or three places, that gives us a fix. So essentially, that's one of the aspects of celestial navigation is you getting a position line. You're taking a bearing from a lighthouse, and that gives you a position line, and you're somewhere on that position line. But with celestial navigation, the sun is your lighthouse, and you're taking a bearing of the sun, and you're somewhere on that position line. And just like with traditional navigation, hopefully most people have learned how to do transferred position lines, because in the Yachtmaster syllabus, you are supposed to do a running fix. And that's what a running fix is a transferred position line that takes your position line and moves it forward or backwards in time. So I remind people about that straight away, and hopefully most people have got Yachtmaster before they do the course with me, so they have learned to do that. But
So
I
I was going to
ask
ask
them,
you that. Are most of the people that do your courses, they will know what you're talking about in that sense? Because like some people just, I mean, on our trips, for example, I usually give just a kind of celestial primer, and I mean, if I started there, it would be over most people's heads because they don't have that training.
no, but you can show someone with a whiteboard how you can transfer a
Mm.
position line, and I do usually show that because I think that's quite an important idea, because we can use that all the time in navigation, traditional navigation if we want to as well. But I guess the concept of of the sun being a lighthouse in the sky,
Yeah, that's
and
actually the same analogy that I use. Is that think of the
yeah,
sun as the top of a very tall lighthouse.
yeah.
But one thing I like to do as well is like I kind of go back maybe a little further and say, what is the simplest form of a fix, which is a bearing and a range. So I give this like thought experiment. I say, imagine you're coming across a green bell buoy in the middle of the ocean, and you don't have any instruments on board, and it's a cloudy day, and your only instrument you have is a radar that will tell you the range to that lighthouse. What is your what can you infer from that information? If you have a range, not to lighthouse, if you have a range to this bell buoy, what can you tell me about your position relative to it? What kind of shape would you make? I'll ask you this. We'll play this little game here.
Well, you've got its bearing, and it'll be an arc, won't it? You
we
asked the
don't,
shape is an
yeah.
arc, yeah.
Well, we don't have a bearing because we don't have a compass. We're just this is a hypothetical, right?
Okay,
So, but you have a distance, you have a range. So you could be 1 mile from that bell buoy. Let's say we're 1 mile, but that would form a circle around the the bell buoy, which is a circle of position, and then I go from there and down the line. But
and then you don't know where you are on that circle, obviously.
You don't know where you are on that circle,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's kind of eventually when you take a sextant sight, you're actually getting a circle of position around the geographic position of the sun, and that's kind of how I make that analogy.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy.
I think what the interesting thing for me, the most fun part of celestial for me, is that even if you never use it to navigate, like never pick up a sextant and use it, learning the concepts of it, I think makes you more aware of your surroundings, just generally. Like even like walking around town, you say, "Oh, the sun's over there. That must mean I'm headed south or east or whatever." You tend to, for me anyway, it anchors me in sort of my physical world in a way that you don't necessarily even think about unless you've been introduced to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being able to draw, that's one of the things that I try and teach on first session, is being able to draw a circle of the sun with the equator and be able to position, depending on the time of year, know where the sun is. Is it below the equator or is it above the equator? And it's surprising how many people just don't know that.
Yeah, exactly. I start the same place as well, and I usually use this. I'll put somebody in the middle of the room, and I'll pretend that their head is the sun, and we take an orange or some piece of fruit with actually a small watermelon works really good for this because it has like longitude lines on it.
Yes, it does.
And then you put it during the seasons, like okay, here's fall, here's summer, here's spring and winter, and if you tilt the earth that way, it kind of visualizes okay, where are the sunbeams hitting the earth, and that's why the sun is above or below the equator. And like it is interesting how like most people would never think about that. Why would you?
Yes, I don't. It's something that I've always known, so
Yeah,
I found
great.
it actually quite bizarre that I would have thought people would have taught you that at school. That's what the seasons are caused by the tilt of the earth, and that's something that is so known to me that yes, but it is something that really confuses people. And also the confusion between the analogy, the description you said there with the sun and the earth, but also if you then try and put it onto on a graph paper and you show the plot of the sun going south of the equator, north of the equator and south of the equator, the difference between that and the 3D picture can be a tricky jump because your brain goes, oh, does that really work?
Are you good at visualizing, like you personally?
I guess I must be. Yes, I think I am. Yeah.
Because I find this when I teach this stuff, I tend to visualize. Like I'm very good at visualizing, and I think I'm pretty good at explaining what I'm visualizing. But I realize sometimes that not everyone can do that. That if you explain something, they can't put a visual picture in your head. So I didn't even know this existed, but they have like so I subscribe to the celestial practice that basically we think of the earth as the center of the universe and everything revolves around it in this celestial sphere. And they actually make a celestial sphere globe. Have you ever seen one of these?
No, I haven't. No.
It is, look it up. It's so cool. I did a course in Annapolis many years ago, and somebody had one and they brought it in, and it's basically a model of the universe that we use to teach celestial that is wrong, but it illustrates this, and it's a really neat device. It's basically the earth at the center, and it's maybe the size of an orange, and then there's a globe-sized clear plastic thing around it, and the earth is suspended in the middle of this, and that globe has all the stars and things on it, and then the sun and the moon and the planets are movable along that see-through sphere. And it's a really neat way to visualize where, okay, it's why it explains kind of why stars have a fixed declination or latitude, and why the sun and moon and planets kind of wander. But look it up. It's a really neat. I mean, it's a cool teaching aid. If nothing else, it's like a neat piece of artwork to have around your house. It's really cool.
That sounds really great. I mean, but that reminds me, the next tricky thing is the new terminology. You know, because we use latitude and longitude. Everybody's come across that, but now suddenly you're talking about declination, Greenwich hour angle, and you've just
So one of the cool things too that I think is revealing when you start teaching celestial, and you hit on this, is how closely related everything is. Like, for example, Greenwich hour angle. Okay, you're measuring how many degrees away from Greenwich is the sun or the whatever body that you're using. And then you come to realize that actually time and longitude are directly convertible. And then it explains, okay, well, if I think about that, how many time zones are there on the world? Well, if the Earth takes 24 hours to spin, each time zone's an hour, there must be 24, and how many degrees? And it's like all tied together. And I won't give the whole spiel now, but I love that part of it, because there's so many light bulb moments that happen for people, because most people, like you say, have been at least introduced to some of this stuff somewhere along the line. You know, they will have heard the seasons talk in grade school, whatever. And then this kind of like ties it all together, where time and longitude are basically the same thing, and how, you know, what makes a degree of latitude, or what makes a minute of latitude into a nautical mile on the Earth, and why is that? Is it the same on the moon? Conceptually, yes, but we don't use nautical miles on the moon because the moon has a smaller circumference, and it's all based on like I call it like an elegant expression of geometry, how we've derived latitude and longitude in the first place. And I usually start my lectures there just as a kind of reminder of what is latitude, really go back to basics, because I get a variety of people. Yeah. And we do this thing and it's like, okay, well, have you ever thought about latitude and longitude? How is it derived? Why is it the way it is? What is a degree of latitude, and what is a degree of latitude on the moon? Is it the same thing conceptually? Yes, but is it the same distance? No. Why? Well, it's because the circumference is different. And like there's so many of these light bulb moments that happen through this. And I just think even if you only get through that part and never actually take a site and reduce it, you've learned so much about navigation in general and your own physical space.
Absolutely, absolutely. So do you, because you're doing it over 2 days then, yeah?
Yeah, which is tight. But I don't get to, I mean, we really only cover sun sites. I do an introduction on star sites and stuff, but we don't go much deeper than that. The first day is basically the first half of the first day is like introduction to all these concepts. And I separate it, right? Because like you've got the concepts of it, and then you've got the tool of using the sextant. And like that is also its own thing. And I compare it, it's like, well, you know, it's like shooting a rifle. Like I'm not going to spend a lot of time teaching you how to use it. I'll teach you how to use a sextant once, but then it's just about practicing. And the more you practice, the more accurate you're going to get. But that's fairly straightforward. It's the concepts that are difficult to grapple with. And then it's putting it all together to actually do like we said at the beginning of this, the handwritten math.
Yeah. Yes. So I separate it out a little bit. I mean, on Zoom, it's much more sort of, this is what a sextant looks like, and these are the bits of the sextant, and this is the theory around how it works. But if people want to, then they have to go out and have a go at doing it. I'm actually going to run a beach session in Cornwall when I'm back in April, and invite people to bring their sextants, because I think that's also quite an important aspect. But I think you're right. Is the introduction to the terms and the terminology, and yes, I do. You know, I think it's important to revise exactly and what a nautical mile is, what latitude and longitude are, and what DR is, what an EB is. You know, all those sort of basic navigational concepts. Because if you don't move forward.
So it's interesting. When I do my nav lectures, like on Falcon, even if it's not celestial, we do the paper chart exercise and plot the route and stuff. And somebody asked me last year, they're like, I know everybody says that like we should do this on the chart, paper charts. She's like, but why? And it took me back. It's like, why do we need to do it this way instead of doing it directly on a chart plotter? Do you have an answer to that? Because it kind of made me pause for a second. It's like, Why do we do this? Why is it that because I think you and I would agree that that is the kind of right way to start and do it, even if you're using electronic nav in practice. Why do we say that?
Well, because we always have to have backups, don't we? We can't always rely on the digital GPS, and if it all goes down, we've already done our homework. We've already got it on the paper chart, and by our log, we've got our position, so we can immediately plot our position on that chart. We can see where we are in relation to our preferred course, and then we can move forward with traditional navigation, and it makes that whole thing faster. But more than that, it gives you a visual representation of it, doesn't it, Andy? When you look on a chart plotter, it's kind of, for planning purposes, for passage planning, I hate the digital. I want to see a proper paper chart with A to B, and then I can actually clearly see if there are any dangers and clearly see the challenges that we have on the route.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's much, much easier to view the big picture on a paper chart. And, where it does beg the question too, like, where do you draw the line with what paper charts you have? I mean, we're required for coding that we have to have a certain amount, but like, I tend to think that for your own purposes, yes, practically speaking, you're most likely going to be using electronic nav, but it's nice to have at least a chart of the overview between all the places you're going to go so you can see the big picture. I just think that's the practical way to do it. You don't have to have a chart for every single potential harbor you might go into.
Although that's nice.
It is nice, but small boats, it's the storage aspect.
I like putting my charts in plastic folders and bringing them on deck when you're arriving in port, because then you've got two different, you can see it on the paper as well as on the chart plotter.
When you teach Celestial, there's all sorts of pro forma, forms. Is there one that you use, or have you made your own?
I've made my own, yeah.
Why have you made your own?
I
think I know why, but I want you to say it.
Well, I think that's another one of the challenges is it's easy to get lost in the process because there are lots of different steps. And there are lots of different steps because we're using books to do the maths. We're not using calculators, which is great because then we don't need anything electronic. But there are lots of tiny little steps you need to do. And a pro forma keeps people on track and helps them focus on what they need to do next in a systematic way. I do really try and focus on what everything means, so they're not just following the pro forma. But I do think also there is a big leap between understanding the theory enough to properly understand the pro forma, and I think it's an iterative process. You teach them the theory of what's going on, then they learn how to do it on the pro forma, and then that gives them a bit more understanding, and then it goes backwards and forwards, and the more you do it, the more you understand about it. But yeah, I think pro forma is a way to go, and it just signposts where they have to go next.
How do you divide up the different steps on the pro forma? Like, do you have discrete sort of segments, or how do you do it?
Yeah, discrete segments. So the first segment is the information from the site, for example. Maybe the second segment is the navigational information, your DR, and what your course is, and your speed. And then the next section is the using the sextant site and correcting it, and so on and so forth. So it sort of takes you through in a step-by-step process.
And well, how come? Because you developed your own just because you weren't satisfied with what was available, or?
Yeah, so I've had a really lovely relationship with Nigel Rennie, who's an RYA Ocean examiner and instructor. And he's been a bit of a mentor to me as I've been teaching Ocean and doing these courses. And he let me initially use his pro formas, which I really liked, and I thought they were really good. And that's what I used to start with. But then I realized that actually I could make improvements. So then I reworked them to be more like how I would like to have them when teaching, and added some of the key things that I wanted to add. And I think the main thing is the signposting what books to go to. So each point I have a little number in it that will say altitude correction tables, or number 2 is the sight reduction table. So it sort of helps remind people which book they're going to pick up next or which table they're looking for next.
I do the exact same thing. I mean, the way I do it on my form is 4 distinct sections, and at the header of each section, it's like, what am I doing and where am I getting this information from? So like step 1 is correcting your own sextant reading. That information comes from your sextant reading and the altitude correction tables. Then step 2, locating the assumed position. That comes from the Nautical Almanac. Step 3 is figuring out the intercept. And then step 4 is, okay, we take all that. I have people copy the information only the information they need to then plot it on the plotting sheet. Because those pro formas, you fill them with numbers, and it's very easy to lose track of, okay, what was the actual number that I need to take to the plotting sheet, and do it that way. And I agree that you have to have those signposts. I think that's the most important aspect of it. It's like you can learn it by memorization, first this, then that, or you can learn it sort of, I say, it becomes intuitive after a while, that if you know what you're looking for, you will both know where to find it and also be more quickly able to catch any mistakes. Because a easy way to make mistakes in this is transcription errors.
Yeah.
You've got these books with thousands of tiny little numbers in there, and even if you know exactly what you're looking for, you might just write down the wrong number, and then everything's gone. But if you know what you need and where you find it, it's easier to find those mistakes, I think.
And that's a classic issue. And I'm dyslexic, so I'm always trying to teach people dyslexic tricks and skills that I have learned to try and stop these errors. So you can get those little sticky labels, and I physically will stick it on, and then I can see that I've made a square around it, and then I can actually double check and triple check and leave it on there. And then the next time I go back, when I check it, because I always do it 2 or 3 times, I can see that I've got the wrong one or the right one. But yes, I mean, the transcription errors is a big, big issue because they're tiny. The numbers are tiny.
It's that, and they're so, like, that's the thing. People get frustrated when they don't get a line of position that lines up with the GPS or comes close. And it's like, not necessarily, you might not have done anything wrong. You might have just looked up a number wrong or put a decimal in the wrong place, or, conceptually, it's back to like the grade school math. Did you show your work? It's like, well, you get the wrong answer, but you did it right, sort of thing.
So if your position line is 5 nautical miles off of your GPS position, Andy, what would you think about that?
I mean, that's like, you can't get much better than that.
That's right. So
yeah. We should have started here, because really people confuse celestial with like accurate navigating. Like, you don't need celestial. You have to remember what it's used for. Celestial is used for deep ocean navigating where there's nothing around. So it doesn't matter if you're 10 miles off. And like, as soon as you spot land, now you're no longer using celestial. Now you're using coastal nav or whatever else. You're not, or depth contours, whatever. There's a million other tools you have that celestial by nature doesn't require accuracy.
But sadly, our charts used to have beautiful little profiles of the land so that you could locate where everything was. And now they aren't on the charts anymore. But just going back to the accuracy, I was lucky to have a couple of the GGR skippers on my last course, which was quite fun. And they'd both done celestial before, so it was just a revision for them. But we came to the situation, 5 miles, that's pretty good. And he was like, what? That's not very good at all. But it's that different. You have to change the way you think about navigation.
Yeah, truly. And you have to, philosophically, you have to become okay with uncertainty. Like, our modern world in general does not really allow for uncertainty. It's false. It's not true. Everybody lives with uncertainty every day. They just don't realize it. But having to become comfortable with that is like a fundamental aspect of actually using celestial if you're using it for real. An example of this, I've only ever done one passage on celestial, and we did it purely on celestial. I wasn't plotting. We did a trip from BVI to Bermuda. Mia kept a GPS log in a book, not plotting it, just the numbers, just for safety reasons. And we did celestial the whole way there. And people asked, like, afterwards, they said, well, how accurate were your sights? And I was like, well, we made it to Bermuda.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I never went back and compared it. We end like they were accurate enough because we ended up Bermuda appeared where I thought it was going to appear when I thought it would appear, and that's all I needed to know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's people you don't think about. It's like, oh yeah, I guess if you're not using GPS, you'd never know how accurate your sites are.
Yeah. So I mean, it's lovely when you put your celestial noon site on the chart, and you can got that lovely plot. And yes, as we got closer to the Azores, it was like, well, Pico's a pretty tall volcano mountain. We're going to see that quite a long way away, and we'll be able to know where we are pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
that gets into safety and seamanship and stuff too. Because like if you're making a passage, so we were coming up from BVI to Bermuda, so we're approaching Bermuda from the south. And if you've ever seen Bermuda on a chart, the south coast is clear. Basically, you're gonna run into the beach before you hit anything. Whereas the north and the west coasts are surrounded by a reef that extends for miles and is a major hazard to shipping and sailing. So if you're doing a celestial passage coming down from New England or the Chesapeake Bay, for example, you're gonna have to be much more conservative as you make your approach because you potentially could be on the reef before you ever see land. And that's kind of where you have to make what navigation tools are you using allows you to dictate how aggressive or conservative you want to be. And then that also begs the question back to like, okay, if you're on electronic nav, it gives you a false sense of security because it's so high resolution. So people make assumptions. Oh, I know I'm right here, exactly right here, and you try more challenging entrances, for example, or you go in at night or whatever, and it leads to higher risk situations that you never would have been able to do, nor would have been comfortable doing pre-GPS.
That's true.
So it's like the whole philosophy of it has changed.
Yeah, and I think reminding ourselves of that philosophy is important because I don't like going into a new port at night time that I don't know about. If I don't know the port and it's night time, I'd rather stand off and hove to for the night and go in first light every time. Yeah.
For you personally, do you practice? Do you keep your skills up on Celestial because you think you might need it one day, or because you enjoy the art of doing it?
I enjoy it. I love it. It's very much, I get excited about it, Andy. And I'm always up for giving somebody a 5-minute lesson on, look, you take a bearing from the sun and then and this gives you a position line and then, and then you've got a fix. So I am passionate about it from a personal point of view. And I also realizing that teaching people really struggle to start with. So that's why I'm doing the short courses, to just give people just the sun, just to give people that little glimpse. And if they go no further than that, that's absolutely fine. But if they do, they've got an arsenal behind it. And also, yes, it does teaching always keeps your skills alive. And
well, I
I
was
think
going to
that's
say
important.
you must have, like, as I've taught it, I've learned way more about it. I understand it better now than ever because I teaching it. You always find better ways to explain things. You kind of have your own sort of light bulb moments. It's like, oh yeah, I knew I was explaining it this way, but now I really know why. I should have asked you at the beginning of this. What site reduction tables do you use?
I teach with rapid site reduction tables.
What is it? 249, the air navigation, I think it's called.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Same for me too. That's what I
Yeah.
learned on originally.
Yeah. I mean, they're the sort of the yachtsman's sort of easy, quick. I know in the States they teach much more on the marine navigation tables because I think that's what their regulatory authority wants people to learn on because it's more accurate.
Have you learned that way? Because I never actually have.
I have used that way, yes, but I don't teach it and I don't regularly use it. But I need to learn this so I know what's going on. And also the videos that, American Celestial Navigation teacher does the free online courses. Name escapes me. But he uses marine navigation tables. And it's a little bit of a shame he doesn't do the rapid site reduction tables as well because the way he teaches is beautiful. And I must admit, I send some of my students to some of his videos, but with the health warning, if you go on and watch all his videos, he does use the marine tables, which are different.
Do you have you ever done like the longhand way, like the actual spherical trigonometry, like without using the books? Have you ever gone into that?
No,
Yeah, I
I've
haven't
tried.
either.
I've done with the calculator and the formulas, but I haven't. Yeah, not
I always
longhand.
find it amusing. Like there's a couple guys that have sailed with us on different 59 North trips that bring their own sextants, and they bring like an app that allows you to plug in your stuff and it'll do it for you. And I kind of feel like, isn't that defeating the purpose? Like we
Yeah,
have, I can show you on my phone exactly where we are. I mean, I guess it's a way for them to check their work if they're doing it longhand. It gives you, like, you plug it into the app and it gives you your intercept,
yeah.
and that. So I guess it's useful for that. But I was chuckled a little bit to myself at that. That's like, wait a minute, aren't we doing this longhand for the fun of it?
I agree. I agree. Although there are uses for that. So when I did my ocean oral, I actually used an app to just double check that I had got all my calculations correct, that there wasn't a big error that I hadn't managed to pick up longhand. So that was a good use for that. So from a learning point of view, as long as you've done the calculation longhand, then I think it's a useful thing to just see if you're working on your own, you haven't got somebody to check it for you. The other thing, that there's a really great little app that I use a lot in teaching and a lot when I'm just trying to inspire people with celestial navigation. So just to get people on board who've never picked up a sextant, show them how to use a sextant, show them how to take a sight, and then they take a sight. And then there's this app that tells you exactly what the sight reading should be at that moment in
Yeah, I've
time.
seen that one. Yeah, yes.
And that's great because then you can have a little competition who can do a closer sight.
Yeah, the app tells you, because the app knows your position, so it knows exactly what the sex. It knows your position, it knows the time, all the things you need. It'll tell you what your sextants should have read. Yeah, I've seen that before as well. That's the one I was actually thinking of. On that note, I was going to ask you. I'll start with a little story. When I did August and I did an online course during COVID, and we did it over like 2 or 3 weekends. We stretched it out because like nobody was doing anything, so people were looking for stuff to do, and but we had no actual site data to use to practice with. So we were basically coming up with our own, like, okay, I'm here at this date, at this time. What would my sextant have read? And that, to me, really kind of cemented my understanding of how the type of celestial we're talking about using 249, how it works, being able to basically reverse engineer it, knowing that if I'm here, if I know all these variables, I have everything, and then using that to sort of just invent sextant sites that I could then use for practice problems. And that to me was like a huge light bulb moment as a teacher. Like, okay, I can do this backwards now. Now I feel like I really understand it.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing to do it backwards. And when you're teaching, you don't really want to overload people with too many tables and books and things like that. So they're trying to go backwards and make sure you're using only the pieces of paper you want people to have. um, and
That's true.
that's I find that's a much harder thing. So I actually haven't done that. I've taken an old out of print book and I've made my own workbook from that.
Yeah. We try to, I tend to, because almost every trip we get the sextant out and we take site data, and I try to keep that and and I have a bunch of old almanacs so I can go back together. Like the course I'm doing in Annapolis, I have site data. We'll probably use 2019. I think we did quite a lot in different parts of the Atlantic and pull that out, because then that gets wonky too. It's like I'm used to doing the reductions from being in the Atlantic, but if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, in the South Pacific, in the, Eastern, everything changes because your perspective is backwards, and that makes it trickier as well. Whether you're same declination as the sun versus opposite versus all this other stuff, it gets you kind of get you get used to it being in the North Atlantic out of the tropics. It's always kind of the same, and then you start moving your position on the Earth, and things change, and that also requires a better understanding of it in the big picture.
Yeah, no, I mean, and yes, I guess that's also why I like to use the workbook that I've made, because it goes east and west, north and south. But as I described my students, it can be harder doing it in a classroom situation because you don't know where you are. Whereas when you're in the North Atlantic, you know you're in the North Atlantic. Whereas for each question, I talk about having a reality check. think, whereabouts am I in the world? What time of the year is it? Where is the sun at that point? As a starting point before you go on to do the calculation. And then, of course, if you're east or west, then the numbers of longitude go in different directions, and the same with north or south. And that catches students out quite regularly. So it's just a case of not rushing and just taking your time and just double checking everything.
That reality check is really important because all these calculations are done using UTC, but you need to know what time of day it was locally on the boat to kind of put yourself in context. Because like the UTC time does not align with reality usually, unless you're very close to England. And it's like, okay, well, the ship's time was 10 o'clock in the morning. That means the sun has to be to the east of us. If it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it has to be to the west of us. And it can kind of, again, double check you when you're looking for these positions in the books. Well, if I know the sun is to the east of me, therefore my bearing has to be less than 180. And if the book tells me something different, I did it wrong. And you have to know the ship's time in order to do that. But you need the UTC to actually do the site reduction. And that, I think that's a really important, like you said, a reality check to put yourself on the boat before you start doing the math.
And then you got all the fun and dangles of when you're in the Pacific Ocean with the international date line.
But on that note, like I was saying before, putting yourself in reality. If you never pick up a sextant, let's use that example. I usually use this one from sailing from Tortola to Bermuda. If you never pick up a sextant, just understanding the concepts of this would allow you, let's say I'm asleep and I wake up and we're supposed to be heading north because it's more or less a due north passage. Well, if I wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, if the sun is not over the starboard quarter, I'm going in the wrong direction. Like I can get in just from looking at where the sun's shining through the port light. I will know if we're on course more or less or not. And I will never have needed to pick up a sextant to tell me that. But understanding those concepts of celestial allow you to do that.
Yeah, or look at a GPS or a compass course or whatever. You can even tell from down below because the swell, your position towards the swell might have changed. The boat will wake you up as well because suddenly you know that the course has changed. Somebody's gone off course. The boat's moving differently. But it all comes back to, yes, you're right. It all comes back to that understanding about where the sun is at what point in the year and what point during the day. And it's amazing how many people don't use it, even on land when you're traveling, doing a car journey. And someone says to me, aren't we off course? And I'm going, no, well, we're definitely going south because I know that.
I use it. I use it when I'm, if I'm in a new place, like usually when I'm on the boat, I'll go for jogs in new places when we've made landfall just to kind of explore. And, I can more or less always find my way back to where I started from just by keeping track of where the sun has been as I'm wandering through a new city or whatever. It's a surprisingly intuitive thing once you become aware of it. Two things. Have you seen the movie Moana?
Yes, I have, but it was a while ago. But it is a great movie. My kids love it.
So it's Axel's favorite movie. It's one of my favorite movies. It's so good. And there's just a throwaway line that Maui, he's teaching Moana how to sail sort of towards the middle of the movie. And he talks about navigating, and he says something. But he uses the term wayfinding because that's what the Pacific Islanders did. That's what they called it. So he said wayfinding he says it quite simply. It's like knowing where you are by knowing where you've been. And it's like a perfect summation of Dead Reckoning, basically, is what he was saying. And most people won't notice that, but if you watch the movie Moana, look out for that line because it's like a perfect encapsulation of what Dead Reckoning is. And I was going to say as well, there's a book called Looking for a Ship. John McPhee is a really renowned nonfiction writer, and he basically followed around a merchant mariner in the U.S. who was literally trying to get a job on a ship, and followed that. What is that life like? And there's a story in that book that was told where this was back in the 90s. So they had GPS, but it was early. But these ships had gyro compasses, which allowed you to steer to a true compass heading.
Yep.
And they were off the coast of South America, I think in the Pacific. And the captain woke up, the captain who was the subject of this book, woke up and realized that the ship was heading back towards the coast when they were supposed to have been going away from the coast simply by where the sun was relative to his cabin. And what had happened was the people on watch who were driving to the compass, the gyro compass had failed. So the ship just very slowly did a 180-degree turn
God.
because the compass heading didn't change. And nobody else noticed until the captain woke up and realized the sun was on the wrong side of the ship and they were heading back to the coast when they should have been going away from it. And it's just one of those things. It's like everybody else was, the compass hadn't changed. They were still on course, but everything else had changed and only the captain noticed it. It was a really interesting story.
That is a great story. Yeah, and I didn't know that the gyro compass could fail like that, which is fascinating. But then you also touched on the sort of Polynesians and the wayfinders. I mean, amazing. And I'm a bit sort of obsessed with that at the moment, and I keep trying to sort of stop myself from buying really expensive books to learn more about it because I just think they're amazing. But there were some good YouTube videos about them as well.
It is true. Like, talk about being in tune with the
Yeah.
world around you. Like, that's what that was. I mean, it's really remarkable. You must have come across the guy named David Lewis and his books.
Oh, it doesn't ring a bell. Why not?
Oh, well, there you go. So David Lewis, he wrote a book called We the Navigators.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He spent some time in the 60s with the Polynesians. And he
Yeah.
also wrote another book, one of my favorites, called Icebird. Has nothing to do with Polynesia, but he went around Antarctica in like a 33-foot steel boat
Okay,
solo
I read that
back
one.
in the 60s or 70s. And the boat, he got dismasted. It's basically a survival story because the boat almost sinks, gets dismasted. It's one of the all-time great kind of old school sea stories that it's called Icebird, so check it out.
Oh,
And
I
actually,
will check that
incidentally,
out.
fun little aside, David Lewis had a wooden ketch named Eastbjorn, and that's why we named Eastbjorn after his boat,
That's
because
great.
I always liked his writing.
Yeah, well, We the Navigators, I've read that, and that is brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, I just forgot the name of the author.
Yeah,
That's terrible, isn't it?
Fascinating. That's all right. That's excusable. So you're doing a course coming up pretty soon, right?
Yeah, beginning of April, over 3 weekends, 3 mornings or 3 evenings in April. I think the first is over the Easter weekend and then the following weekend. Yeah, so 6 3-hour sessions is what I do. And previously I did it over 3 weekends, and this time I'm doing 3 sessions, a break, and then 3 sessions. And that gives people the opportunity to go and practice and do some revision and come back to it again. So I think that works quite well. But I'm going back to England on Saturday to teach Yachtmaster, which is a bit different.
Do you just in general, do you enjoy you must enjoy the teaching aspect of what we do? As like, where do you fall on like you just want to be a skipper and drive the boat versus you want to teach people? Where on that continuum do you fall, do you think?
Towards the teaching end, actually. And it makes your life harder because if you're just the skipper, but I think part of being the skipper is coaching and teaching and supporting people and inspiring people. So I love that because that you can be a really important part of someone's sailing journey by just taking the time to talk to them about something that they're confused with or something that they want to know about. And the whole process of teaching your crew and upskilling your crew is a safety thing as well, because if something happens to you, you want them to be able to get out of trouble.
I mean, that was must have been top of mind for you when you took your family across the Atlantic and back, because as I recall, they weren't really sailors. You were the sailor in the family.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I didn't get out of my oilskins for about 10 days, the first trip we did across Biscay. I was literally in my life jacket, oilskins, down below when I was trying to sleep. But I learned really quickly the boat would wake me up, so that was reassuring. And they became really good sailors, actually. They really did. And it was a few years ago, my youngest son came sailing again, and I was so impressed how much he'd learned. I thought he'd spent the whole journey, listening to stories and making films, and no, he picked up a ton. The kids just like sponges. So the return journey across the Atlantic to the UK, they all knew what they were doing. So that gave me so much more time to be able to coach them on things, and for me to be able to focus again on the Celestial, which was great. So I must admit, lots of people talk about So the taking sights of the stars will give you a more accurate fix because you haven't got to do a transferred position line, but you've only got 20 minutes or so to get those sights down. So that's a much more challenging thing to do. But I did have a bit of time playing around with that, which was quite good.
Have you ever tried? I read this. Moitessier writes about a method that he would use to take star sights without the telescope. Have you tried that?
I did, and that was quite good for locating. But then actually for taking the sight, I did put the telescope back in. So I did a half and half method.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. I tried that the first time. I was like, wow, it actually works surprisingly well. I enjoyed that. Do you, speaking of books, do you have any, like when you do your courses, do you recommend any books on celestial for further reading that you like to use?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Are you going to tell me?
This is when I haven't got my list ready in front of me. And I'm really rubbish at names because I'm dyslexic. But there's an American guy, is it John David Birch? He's got a big, thick tome. I can correct it with you and send you the link later, Andy, so you can put it on the page. But it's a big, thick book.
Yeah.
It's not a beginner's book at all, but it is a great book. If you've got a specific question and you're at sea and you want an answer, you'll find it in that book. There's another book I used, which I used for learning again. I had an issue. My father taught me, and I then thought I knew how to do celestial navigation. And then I started learning again, and I didn't know there were different methods. Nobody told me that at the beginning. So I got myself really confused. And I bought this other book that's actually out of print that actually I really like because it's very clear. Which books do you use?
I was taught, so I first learned celestial with John Kretschmer at one of his workshops back in like 2007, and he uses a book by a guy called Hewitt Schlereth called Celestial in a Nutshell, and it is just that. It's quite small, but it's very easy to understand. I tend to, so I give a copy to each person that does my in-person courses, but it's more useful to read it after you've had some sort of introduction with a teacher like yourself or whatever, because because it's full of terminology, like we said. So if you've been exposed to it a little bit, it's a great way to go back and refresh kind of what you learned in a course, because it's probably a little bit too not sort of deep enough to try to just pick it up and learn it from scratch. But it's a great refresher if you've taken it, if you already know it or you've done it in the past. It's a great refresher. So that's the book that I use.
The other book that I have that I actually take with me all the time, and also I encourage my students to get it, it's really thin, and it's Tom Cunliffe's book. And because it's thin, it doesn't take a lot of space, but it's really good if you've got a question. How do I do that? You can jump into it and check. As in the same way, it's not a book to necessarily teach you, but I use it if I'm actually trying to show someone, because it's got some nice diagrams, so I might open it up at the right page and show them that diagram if I haven't got that with me. But that also is quite a nice little book to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, I mean, anything by Tom Cunliffe, I love the way he writes. He's a very, very good writer. Cool. All right. Well, JoJo, I will let you get off to your walk. This has been enlightening, and I'm going to post that. This is going to go up on the quarterdeck in the next 2 weeks, I think.
Oh, wow. Well, it's lovely to talk to you, Andy.
Good. Well, thanks for this, JoJo, and nice talking to you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you very much for listening, and thanks again to BVI Yacht Sales for sponsoring the show. Find them at bviyachtSales.com. If you want to join the Quarterdeck, go to quarterdeck.59-north.com. The Quarterdeck podcast is produced by August Sandberg for 59 North. Music is by the Storm Weather Shanty Choir.